Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7 by 7. So, considering that we just got that trailer a few days ago, I'm continuing my series of looks at the main characters of Solo, A Star Wars Story, and putting together all the things that we know about them at this point. And today, it's time for Lando's turn in the spotlight. So, we start off by looking at the sequence of videos that we've gotten so far. The Super Bowl commercial, which was just one tantalizing glimpse of Donald Glover in a fur coat that sent the internet into a tizzy. And everybody's saying, that's it, he's already won Lando, period, paragraph, end of story. It's certainly not the first look that we actually had at Donald Glover as Lando. There were a couple of behind-the-scenes photos shared by Ron Howard on his Instagram and Twitter accounts of Donald Glover on set, and also a couple of photos of what we all presume to be his wardrobe as well. But that first moment of live action footage is rather stunning and perfect in every single way. Or at least that's certainly the reaction. And I saw it and I said, okay, yeah, that's gotta be Lando. Only he would be walking around in a fur coat like that. Of course, when you see the whole commercial and you realize, well, there's a snow planet involved, maybe it's not weird to see him in a fur coat just because, hey, snow planet, but all the same, even if there wasn't a snow planet involved, you can see Lando in a fur coat. You can absolutely see that. Then we get the teaser, and the teaser, we still don't get dialogue from him. So we only get a smile as he's kind of leaning back at the gambling table and, you know, smile like that. And then a little jaunty salute in time with L3 before they go to light speed in the cockpit of the Falcon. And then the stinger at the end where Han says, you know, I thought we were in trouble for a minute, but it's fine, everything's fine. And then that giant electrified tentacle or series of tentacles, whatever it is. All you hear is Donald Glover making some indistinct yelling noises along with the rest of everybody on the ship. And the rather interesting thing about that scene is that Han is flying the Falcon and Lando is not. So why is that the case? Has it already happened? Has ownership of the Falcon passed from Lando to Han at this point? Or is it a situation where maybe they had an earlier bet and he said, you know, I bet I can fly your ship better than you can. All right, well, we'll bet on it and see what happens. So it could be the start of it, maybe not, but I think it's really interesting that we have Han and Lando in the cockpit together and Han is the one who's flying at that point. So maybe, you know, I at one point thought that the last thing that we would see in the movie would be Han winning the Falcon from Lando. Like that would be how it ended. And then, you know, roll credits. You know, or it would be the one episode of a Star Wars movie that had a stinger at the end or somewhere buried in the credits, and that would be the scene with him winning the Falcon there. But anyway, could happen sooner in the movie after all. And part of that is fueled by the trailer. What we get in the trailer, the first look at Lando is when Han comes into that gambling den and you see Lando reaching for a giant pile of credits and then holding up because he's looking at, oh, what's going on here? And we all assume it's because he's looking at Han. And later on, we see a shot of Han shoving an enormous pile of credits into the middle of the table. So what possibly could Lando use to see that bet? Well, could be the keys to the Millennium Falcon, maybe. I mean, that's certainly one possibility. But we finally get our first line of dialogue from Donald Glover as Lando in that trailer that just came out less than a week ago, where Han says, you know, I heard a story about you, I'm wondering if it's true. And Lando says famously, and it's already famously, because this is exactly what Lando would say. Everything you've heard about me is true. Like, just period, paragraph. And I have to imagine that because of the fact that Alden Ehrenreich has already said, hey, you know, it's a very funny movie, it's written with a lot of good lines, Larry Kasdan working on this thing, man, I hope he pulled out all the stops on this, because really this should be a very funny movie considering Han and Lando together in this. And in case you thought that Donald Glover was going to be too soft for the role, I never saw anybody complaining about that. But you know what? He's a young guy, right? He's a young Lando. So you almost think, oh, you know, you want some grit in him. And when he yells at L3 to let go of the mean man's face like that, L3! Like, that is a very strong voiced command. So yeah, there's definitely some authority to this young man, which is really awesome to see. And then, of course, there's the cool as cool can be. You might want to buckle up, baby, to Han when they're in the Falcon. And outside the Millennium Falcon, there is a brief shot of him looking up at some unknown menace and firing a blaster. And that's actually a rather rare thing because, yes, in The Empire Strikes Back, we saw him firing at stormtroopers, but we didn't see him with a gun in Return of the Jedi. We saw him with one in a holster in his general's uniform, but he never actually fired one in Return of the Jedi. And his character in other outlets has said that he definitely doesn't like to carry blasters around and doesn't like to give people the idea that he's a threat. He would rather talk his way out of things, but he is secretly very well practiced with a blaster, and anybody who has seen him use a blaster is usually dead, or at least it's Lobot maybe, who can keep a secret, essentially. That's the whole idea. So it's neat to see him using a blaster, and you have to wonder, are they going to keep with this idea that he's very secretive about the fact that he can use a blaster and use it well? So that's going to be something we'll have to watch out for. And the rest of anything else has only come from interviews that he's done. And one of them was actually just recently. It was a couple days ago on the Star Wars show where he talked with Andy Gutierrez about Lando's costume choices and about how he kind of thought of Lando as making decisions that were almost like high school or early years of college in terms of his wardrobe and his facial hair choices, and thinking that, he probably had it dialed back on the cape business by the time The Empire Strikes Back came around. But yeah, there was something that he had said in another interview where he said that, Lando's idea of who he was at the age that we see him in Solo: A Star Wars Story is that, he's basically trying a lot harder than he needs to, considering who he is and what he is in the world, and that, like, maybe an older Lando would have given him that advice, like, yeah, you don't have to try so hard. At least this is what I recall in the back of my brain. But there is one other thing that I want to reference for you as well, and that's his conversation with Billy Dee Williams, because the two of them, of course, had a wonderful lunch sit down and talked about Lando's character as well. And I'm going to do that over on the audio version of the podcast at sw7x7.com/iTunes or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. But for now, it just remains for me to say thank you so much for watching, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.